In this problem, we are to find the equation of a line passing through these 2 points that are given, and we are to leave our answer in y equals mx plus b form. Since they want my answer in y equals mx plus b form, I think the best way to proceed is to just use the method where you start by finding m and subsequently finding b. So the definition of m, the slope, would be to take these 2 points, which are x, y pairs, and since there are 2 of them, we tend to label them accordingly, that we have x sub 1 and x sub 2, and this would be y sub 1 and y sub 2. And if you remember the slope formula, you are to subtract the y values, y2 minus y1, and you are to subtract the x values, x2 minus x1. And make sure that your difference in y's go in the numerator and your difference in x's go in the denominator. So for my problem, the slope would be just substituting y2 is 7 into here, and then we are to subtract y sub 1, which is 2. In my denominator, we have x sub 2 is 5. And we are to subtract whatever x sub 1 is, which happens to be a negative 3. So be careful, there's already a subtract symbol in the slope formula, and then x sub 1 also has a negative, so there are 2 negatives involved, if you will. So when we go to do this, we have 7 subtract 2 in the numerator, which is 5. And in my denominator, when you subtract a negative, you can think of that as becoming addition. So I get that my slope, m in the formula, is 5 divided by 8. So that's my slope. The difficult part about getting b is to get students to write this out with replacing m with this and leaving b as b. If you were to do that, you can see the next step is actually pretty simple. So I found my slope is 5/8, and I don't know b, so I'm just going to leave it b. So in mathematics, if you want the value of one of the constants, then you're going to have values for the other 2. So the only way I'm going to get through this problem is if I have the value for an xy pair. Turns out I have 2 examples of an xy pair, and you can use either one to finish the problem. Now, most students would rather keep things positive, so I'm going to use my second point since both the x and the y are positive. So what I'm going to do now is where I see x, I'm going to replace it with 5. So this x is going to become 5. And the y value here is 7, so I'm going to replace y with 7. And then putting in the rest of the equation, don't forget that this was equal to 5/8 times x. And then we have the plus b. So all I've done was substitute my slope in, leave b as b. Again, this is the step that's difficult to get students to remember to write. And then simply replace x with 5 and my y value with 7. So basically we need an equation that passes through 5, 7. We're going to find the b value by solving this. That just forces that issue. We're going to find the b value so that when someone plugs in 5 for x, they will get out 7. When you multiply fractions, you just multiply the numerators and denominators, giving you 5 times 5 or 25 in the numerator, and 8 times 1 in the denominator. To solve for b, since the 25/8 is being added, I will subtract 25/8 on both sides of the equation. And on the right hand side, this would be easy to explain. On the right hand side, when you take a number and subtract itself, you get 0. So there's nothing left on the right except for the letter b. Then the question is, what happens over here on the left? How do you take 7 and subtract 25/8? So if you remember how to subtract fractions, you need a common denominator. So right now my denominator is a 1 since there's nothing written there. So you need to, via multiplication, multiply this denominator by something that gives you 8. Well, that would be 8. 8 times 1 is 8. Doing so makes my denominator now 8, but it is mathematically incorrect to just multiply denominators by 8. But what you can do in mathematics is multiply by the number 1. If you multiply the denominator by 8, multiply the numerator by 8, and that works. But the reason it works is you multiplied by the number 1. And when you multiply by 1 in mathematics, the value of that expression does not change. So I'm going to multiply the numerators. 8 times 7 is 56, and 8 times 1 is 8. And we still have to subtract off the 25/8. I need now just subtract these 2 numbers. So with subtracting fractions, you subtract the numerators but not the denominators. So my denominator will be left 8. when I subtract, you would get 31. So I get that my b value, by doing this subtraction, is 31/8. Don't forget to go the extra mile and go up here and plug that back in here. So our final answer, if you put it in full form, would be y equals mx plus b. And I found that the m is 5/8. And I just went through this process to find that b was positive 31/8. So that would be a linear equation in y equals mx plus b form.